Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit. Welcome to Roll for Crit and our review of The Liberation of Rietburg, which takes place in the World of Andor series of board games. It's a cooperative game for 2 to 4 players. You will take on the role of a specific hero with their own set of skills and abilities, and you are trying to liberate Rietburg from all sorts of monsters and evildoers, and ultimately complete a number of tasks set out before you before the evil dragon returns.
Quick disclaimer before we continue, you will not actually see the evil dragon Turok in this game, win or lose. That is for another game in the Andor line. Now, in this game, you will choose a hero that has 3 to 4 character cards. You'll be playing one of these cards each turn usually, which have a choice of options, usually fighting, gathering resources, or moving or flipping over cards. You can see here they have the symbols with or in between, so you know what actions you have available depending on what you choose. On this board, you can move your character around, very simple, or you can pull people to your location. You can also gather willpower or arrows specifically to the archer. You may also fight. Fighting is very simple. You need to match their strength in their corner. Depending on the characters, you might not have something strong enough in which you can use the willpower tokens you've collected to boost your power because you're showing more courage. Now, when you defeat a monster, they have a reward, sometimes punishment, that will go to the person who defeated them. If you decide to group together to fight something, only whose turn it is will receive those boons or banes. Now, usually this will be gold put into your sort of trophy pile, your victory pile. It can be a friend card from here, which is pretty much just an extra card with a cool ability or some other interesting effects. The final common action you'll see is flipping. Now, some of these encounter cards will come face up and show the monster. Sometimes they'll be face down. In order to fight them, you need to flip them face up, so that will be one of the actions you take. Now, not all the encounters are monsters. Sometimes you'll get items, in which case you get to pick it up for free. The items are one-time uses, so use them wisely.
So each turn you're choosing a card from your hand to play, but if you run out of cards, then you're going to be forced to take the hero revitalization action. This will allow you to take all those cards back into your hand, so you're refreshed, you now have your full set of actions available to you, but in exchange, you're going to have to draw a new narrator card. This has a little bit of a story on it, tells you how the different monsters are creeping in and around the kingdom, but really they are just going to tell you where to put new encounter cards. Sometimes they'll be face up, sometimes they'll be face down. That could have different effects or benefits or things that will make things more complicated depending on what cards or objectives are in play. And of course, you will notice there are task cards face down at each of those locations, and those encounter cards go on top of those task cards. Now, if you manage to clear out one of those spaces of all those monsters or possibly items that might be there, then you can flip that task card over and read what it says. This will be some kind of a goal. It might be a monster that you have to defeat with a unique condition. It might tell you need to have a certain amount of gold collected or items, and you will have to complete 4 of those tasks after revealing them in order to win the game.
And that's basically it. Play your cards, defeat encounters, and complete tasks before the narrator deck runs out. If that case happens, the dragon has returned, and I guess he eats you. This is a spin-off for the Legend of Andor series, and I'm curious what your thoughts on this, Jonathan. The first thing that came to mind for me mechanically-wise was actually Gloomhaven.
I don't know. So yes, it has that Gloomhaven thing where you're running through the cards in your hand and then you have to rest. And that's also kind of a pressure of a time limit, because if you rest too many times, then you will lose the game. And that is ultimately the pressure in this game. That's what you're worrying about. The puzzle of it is, how do we complete what we need to complete in a limited amount of turns? Because you have however many cards it is in that narrator deck at the start, and there are ways to maybe get more cards or maybe even add more narrator cards to that deck. But ultimately, you're kind of figuring out at the beginning, we have a certain number of moves here. We have to optimize and be efficient, and that is the game.
And the cards also have multiple choices, so it's not simply like, this is my only attack card. You could use it to move, you could use it to gather resources, whatever you need. I will say though, those two mechanics which definitely really connected with Gloomhaven with me is where they end. Gloomhaven is this giant board game narrative and it tries to be very tightly designed because it's a campaign game. This is much more lighter and random. Those task cards can vary in goals, and sometimes we've had ones where we started the game up, was able to look at a task card and completed it like that. I think you completed 2 on your first turn. We had one game where it was down to the last card. The games can really vary, not just on, they have like different difficulties, like there's harder monsters you can shuffle in or add or remove task cards, but it's sometimes just what tasks get added in.
Yeah, it's definitely not, like you said, not as heavy as some other games. I think it's a nice light to medium co-op experience. It'll probably last you maybe 30 to 45 minutes, something like that, depending on number of players too. And there are a bunch of different characters that you can play as, and they do play pretty distinctly.
That is true.
Yeah, there's some of them are more basic and you just have your attack and whatever. Some of them use those arrows and you actually use arrows to fight instead of just the numbers on your cards.
Mm-hmm. There's one with a water spirit, one that has books, so you choose which books you can use, but you can't use it until you refresh again. So I'm going to use the big attack book. Well, I can't use the big attack. Yeah, spell books,
sorry. Regular books.
Yes.
You're not just throwing books.
I think my favorite, though, just because to me it's hilarious, is the guy with the axe, because he starts off with this shiny axe. It's beautiful. Gives +4 attack. But as soon as you use that bonus, it becomes dull. It only gives +1, which you can keep using the +1. But you're going to need to spend gold to sharpen it up and make it nice and shiny again.
Yeah, I thought some of those were really clever and are very interesting. And there's a good sense of teamwork in this. Sometimes you can use your cards to move other people to your location, or again, pool your attack power together to take down a big monster. But really, I think the teamwork comes in the form of, look, we can only do so much. So you got to go there and do this, and I'm going to go here and do this. And I thought that discussion was interesting.
In the end, I think, once again, maybe connecting to Gloomhaven, this is a game where it uses combat as sort of trickery to hide that's really a puzzle game. It's all about trying to use your moves as efficiently as possible, and except deal with a bit more randomness to make sure you can make it in time before the narrator deck runs out. Crits and misses for the Liberation of Rietburg.
Crits. This is a cooperative game with an emphasis on cooperative. It requires strong teamwork amongst the players in order to secure a victory.
You are playing as great, powerful heroes, but you will not be able to lone wolf this. We either work together or fail alone.
Each character provides a unique experience with their own distinct icons and playstyles, and you can mix and match them for a different take every time you try it.
Whether it be using the arrow tokens or the water spirit, each one is slightly different from the rest, but enough that it is enjoyable to try out a new character. Misses. We were not blown away by the art style or any of the narrative from the narrator cards. We felt this was pretty generic for the most part for a fantasy-themed game.
Those narrator cards imply the presence of a larger story, but none of it really comes across in the game outside of a few bits of relatively weak flavor text.
There are rules and additional components to change the difficulty to what you see fit, but in the end, it seems the largest contributor to difficulty will be the task cards. Depending on which ones you get and where they end up, your game can end very quickly and easily, or turn out to be extremely difficult, drawn out to the very last action.
Neither of us had experienced Legends of Andor or any of the other games in this universe, so we can't compare it directly to that, and maybe for fans of that, they get a kick out of this theme and this style. But I know for me, it just had, like you said, a very kind of a generic fantasy, a very old school Lord of the Rings-esque look to it that didn't exactly thrill me. And even the title, I didn't realize until we played it that it was a fantasy theme. To me, the Liberation of Rietburg just sounds like a very generic, dry Euro name. So when we found out, it's like a co-op monster fighter game, that took me by surprise. But in spite of the theme and everything, I did enjoy a time playing it, and even though there are those weird kind of difficulty spikes, or whatever the opposite of a spike is a dip, I guess.
Pit?
Yeah. A part of me kind of almost doesn't mind that because the games play pretty quickly, and I still prefer, I still am happy that every time you play, different cards will come out and different combinations, and you will have a very different experience each time. So to me, it's kind of like a hit and a miss.
I do feel on the front, because we haven't played any Andor games, that probably hurt it a bit, because in the rule book, like I mentioned earlier as a joke, it says like if the narrator deck runs out, the dragon arrives and you lose. But if you complete the task, you get to fight him. You won't find out yet until like I think number set 5 for Legends of Andor. I do feel like there's like little sprinklings of characters and stories from that if we played before, we'd be like, oh man, or I get to play as this character,
Yeah.
that would help a lot. But because we're going to this new, it just comes off as trolls, guy with sword, elf with bow.
Right. Yeah. It is what it is. It's not the most exciting thing, and honestly, to me, that's the biggest thing that's hurting this game. Is I think if you just look at it on a shelf, it just doesn't look that exciting. But if you do have a group that enjoys co-op games that are, maybe you like sort of a Gloomhaven kind of thing. I don't know why we keep mentioning it. It does kind of relate to it, but it's very light and pretty easy to teach, and it got enough strategy to it, but it's not a major brain burner. Like you can just kind of sit down and hang out, introduce this to new people, and I think it's pretty fun.
Well, I think the reason it has that feeling is when you think of combat, usually you have to worry about your health, and people are like, oh, I got to play more defensively, because that's not a thing. It's just the timer. For people who are a little bit newer, you can be like, oh, I'll just try this out. And yeah, you may lose sometimes, but you'll never feel like you get knocked out. There's no player elimination kind of thing, which does help that and can bring more people to the table to try this out.
Yeah. So the Liberation of Rietburg. Let us know what you think about it in the comments section. Have you had the chance to try it out? Especially if you are a fan of the Andor universe, maybe you have different thoughts. Is that theme really strong, or is it just kind of okay across the board? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Also love to hear your thoughts on the box size and if this box needed to be as big as it is. I don't know.
That is always a fun thing we're talking about. But I'd love to know in the comments, how many different ways do you think I mispronounced the title?
Yes,
leave that down below.
Behind the scenes, take your guesses. Whoever gets closest, I don't know. You'll sleep easy.
I'll say it out loud on the podcast.
There you go.
I'll read them all out. Our favorites.
All right. Until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this is Roll for Crit.
If you love board game content, do us a favor, like and subscribe, and support us on Patreon.
Keep watching our content to guarantee you'll top deck a good video.